Hi, lovely and darling viewers. It's Jen here at Check Her Joy, and this time I'm reviewing Apollo 23 by Justin Richards. This is a new series, Doctor Who adventure, and it follows the 11th Doctor and Amy Pond. So in this book, we have an astronaut just appearing in the middle of a London street, and everybody around him just thinks this is a publicity stunt. But it's actually an astronaut who just came from the moon. Like, he's not supposed to be in the middle of London at all. Um, a side effect of him getting transported to London is that this woman and her dog gets transported to the moon. Unfortunately, they die because, no air, not in a spacesuit. Um, and also that it rained on the moon for a little bit. The Doctor and Amy appear in London, see this astronaut, and start investigating what happened, which leads them to the moon where they find this entire base set up on the dark side. It's interesting. Like, I love the astronaut appearing. That's like my favorite part. And then trying to figure out how we got from the moon to Earth and the woman from the Earth to the moon. That whole mystery was like my favorite part of this book. And then the Doctor and Amy use the TARDIS to get to the moon, which is awesome. And they find a whole operation going on there and exploring it and what's going on. And then we find out that there's this alien threat, and these aliens want to take over all of the Earth, and the Doctor and Amy need to stop them. And also get the people who are on the moon back to Earth without bringing any of the aliens. I think that's pretty much all I can tell about this plot. That's not a spoiler. Um, so basically, I love the idea of the moon base and being able to transport from there to the moon without having to go through a spaceship and the space shuttles and everything. Um, However, like, the main alien threat in this book isn't quite as exciting as the technical things with the like transport thing going on here. So the alien threat is this kind of vague threat that isn't really very immediately dangerous feeling to it. So it makes this book feel kind of less exciting as we get towards the end and figure out what the aliens are and how to stop them. So it's not the greatest plot wise. It definitely like tapered off towards the end and definitely started losing my interest as we got further into the book. The Doctor and Amy are awesome. There are a few people in the base that are kind of interesting. I also feel like we didn't get to know anybody well enough to really love or hate any of them. So there are a bunch of personnel and a bunch of characters, but it's all kind of vague and not well done, so it kind of loses its interest also. This is making this book sounds a lot worse than it is. It is interesting, it's entertaining. I gave it 3 stars. I really did like it. I just didn't love this book. So the whole premise of the moon and it raining on the moon, it kind of just reminded me a bit of Smith and Jones, the season premiere for season 3 with Martha, where like the whole hospital gets transported to the moon and it rains there. I felt like it was kind of a recycled idea of it, and so I kind of so there's too many similarities between what's going on here with what's going on in that episode, and so I couldn't help but compare them, and this doesn't feel as good. I mean, don't get me wrong, it feels like the Doctor and Amy, which is like the opposite problem I had with the Forgotten Army, where it didn't feel like the Doctor and Amy, but the plot was awesome. This one is kind of the opposite. So in this book, the Doctor and Amy transport directly to the moon, and so they just appear on this base, and nobody seems to question it that much, which makes me curious and puts me off a little bit. Like, nobody's like, hey, how did these 2 people get here? Like, they just take his explanation that he works for the government and the psychic paper, and they're like, okay, sure, yeah, all right. And they don't question like how he got there or anything. And they just start letting him poke around with all their really expensive machinery and life support systems. which seems weird. Like, I know the Doctor, I would trust him, but if I just met him and didn't know who he was and he just showed up, especially someplace where people shouldn't just randomly show up, I'd be a little more suspicious. Um, Later in the book, the Doctor just appears on Earth, and the people there are like, hey, I've heard of you, I've read the unit files, but nobody on the moon says that they've read files about the Doctor. Like, they don't know who he is at all. Um, so it's kind of strange. And this alien threat that's looming in the background is just kind of looming for most of the book. In fact, most of the book we don't even know there are aliens involved. And so they just kind of randomly get thrown in as a plot point. And it's just not that as exciting. I did like this book. It's 3 stars out of 5. I enjoyed it. It was entertaining. I read most of it at work. It's a good book for that. But it's not one of the books that I'm passionately in love with. Like, there are Doctor Who books that I adore, and this is not one of them. Yeah. So check this book out if you guys want to, and if you don't, it's not the biggest loss in the world, basically. Yeah. I'm going to do a spoiler section for this book, so if you haven't read it yet, peace out. I love you guys and keep reading. And if you have spoilers, and more spoilers. Okay. So the base in this book is actually a prison/medical facility where they're doing experimentations on the prisoners. And it's creepy. And I feel like the Doctor's pretty outraged about this. And I don't know why they think this is, like, it's so bad that you had to take your experimentations off world to the moon because you can't do them anywhere on Earth. So you thought this was gonna be okay? Like, what is wrong with you people? And they're doing, like, mind experimentations where they're wiping people's memories and trying to replace them. And it's just such a weird concept. And then we have the aliens who are inserting themselves into the holes in people's memories and taking over people. Which is a cool concept, but the entire thing about the aliens is that we don't see them in a physical form until the very end of the book. And so it's hard to remember that there's this threat because we're not physically seeing it. The whole survival aspect seems a lot bigger of a deal for most of the book. Like, there's kind of 3 distinct phases in this book. There's the trying to figure out the first part, with the astronauts suddenly appearing in London, trying to figure out what's going on in the base, and making sure people don't die. And then the last bit is the aliens showing up, and it feels very, like, it's supposed to be the big climax of the book, but it feels like it's this own separate thing that isn't really quite as tied into the others. Also, the characters in here are kind of weird. So we don't get a whole lot of personal information. There isn't a ton of interactions between the Doctor and Amy and the rest of the people on the base. And it's hard to care when they're military personnel who have signed up for this. And they know that's part of their job. And really, they messed this up on their own. So we don't quite feel as bad about it as, like, if a civilian population were in immediate danger. Basically, you just need to cut off contact from the Earth and the Moon, which they've already done. So, like I said, the threat's not really there. And then one of the members of the base, I think it's Carlisle, who Amy thinks gets taken over by the aliens and replaced with an alien memory, but we as an audience know that she hasn't. And so it doesn't feel as strong. Like, it's not as big a shock when, like, the Doctor and Amy find out that, hey, oh my gosh, she's been normal the whole time and we can trust her. Like, it would have been a lot stronger if we didn't know that. Like, if it was a surprise and you're like, hey, normal human, yes. So I feel like that took some of the suspense away. I think the book just feels like 3 distinct things going on here is the problem with it, rather than one big story. I just feel about this book when I finished it. Like, I was way more excited when I was starting reading it, and, like, all right, the moon is going to be awesome, but it just didn't live up to the expectations that I had for it. It was too similar to Smith and Jones, and also Water on Mars, when we find out that there's this reservoir underneath. It just made me think of that other episode, and it's just, it's not good when it reminds me of too many other Doctor Who episodes, and kind of makes me think of them instead when it's not an intentional thing. Like sometimes in Doctor Who, the Doctor's remembering something that actually happened in its episode that we've seen, and so it works with it and it helps. In this case, remembering other Doctor Who episodes had no bearing on this book and it didn't help, and so it was distracting, but also not something that I could like shut off. Like, yeah, there's my opinions and thoughts on Apollo 23 by Justin Richards. Yeah. Peace out. I love you guys and keep reading. Bye.